Ducks fans. Are you ready? You are listening to the Ducks and Pucks podcast with your hosts, Mike Walters and Eddie Jones. This is the #1 home for Anaheim Ducks talk and analysis. Here we go.
All right, welcome back to Ducks and Pucks. We have a different edition for you this week. It's not just Eddie and myself. We also have Adam, Tasha, and Thomas on as well. You guys followed us and see their articles as well, so they're going to add some more input to our discussion this week. We're going to focus a lot on the trade rumors and everything going on with the Ducks making a move and other teams making a move and the deadline coming up. So we're going to go over all of that. But before we do that, we're going to go over last week. The 3 games that the Ducks played. Eddie, we talked about this. We thought the Ducks would win 2 out of 3. The Ducks did win 2 out of 3, but not quite what we thought. We thought that they would beat the Jets and the Maple Leafs and maybe lose to the Blues, but it ended up being different. The Ducks beat the Jets, beat the Blues, had a crazy game against the Leafs, which we'll talk about. But let's get started first with the Jets game.
Yeah, I mean, we expected them to win, to go into the Jets game and win. Obviously, it's going to be a tough game. They play a physical game, but they're struggling in a tough Central Division this year. And they came out and played well and carried on for the other few games. They had 2 power play goals in this game. Perry continued scoring. Raquel got the first goal of the game. And it was just a strong effort. They outshot them 35-20, and pretty much what we expected, and really what we hoped they would get off to on these 3 games coming up.
Yeah, and how about the special teams in this? Thomas, we talked about this. The Ducks in this game were flawless. They killed off all the power plays that Winnipeg had, and they went 2 for 2 on the penalty kill, which has still been the top in the league.
Yeah, I mean, the Ducks penalty kill has been the best in the league this season. It's simply phenomenal. It starts with Ryan Kessler winning that first faceoff almost every single time. It was not Kessler, it's Thompson, it's Torkoff. One of them winning that draw and clearing the puck. It's Gibson, it's Andersen, it was Khudobin, all making big saves with the Ducks down a man. And the power play has been their biggest weakness for most of the season, but over the last, 5, 6, 7, 8 games, it's really picked up. And, in that game, it was great. It went 2 for 2, I believe, and just, they were passing well, they were shooting well, they made great decisions, they entered the zone, they won the face-off, and just the power play looked phenomenal for one of the few times this season. It was really great to see.
Yeah, it was an all-around good effort by the Ducks. I thought that they played well offensively and defensively, and I think that Kessler's been picking up a lot better. We saw him do well last week, and he does better in some of these games. How impressed are you, Adam, by him? I read some articles about some people, talking a little bit of trash, more so from the Canadian media. But what do you think about Kessler as he's been picking it up this last week and a half?
I think that it's certain. Can be the player that he was last year and the player he's been in Vancouver. I'm just really excited, and it's something that we're going to need this last half as we're fighting to get into the playoffs, and then when we get into the playoffs, if we can have playoff Kessler again, that's really what we need as a team.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. If we get more of a playoff Kessler and then getting that second line going, then that's what the Ducks are going to need. Tasha, anything you have to add about this game the Ducks took against the Jets?
No, I thought we played sound defensively and offensively, and I just think we just seemed to click that night.
Yeah, and that's what we had hoped after this game, going into the game against Toronto, which ended up being a complete cluster, I don't like to complain about the refs. I don't like to say that they cost the Ducks a game, but the refs really screwed up this game, for lack of a better term. I have no other way of putting it, Eddie. The Ducks did lose this game 4-0. They did not play well after the first 20 minutes, but the refs really let this go.
Yeah, and the Ducks always seem to struggle against the Leafs. I'm not sure what it is. I mean, every team has a team they seem to struggle against, and recently it's been the Leafs, and no matter what coach seems to be behind the bench for them, the Ducks just seem not to be able to beat them. I mean, the games that I get to see, I have to go over to the ACC, and every time I've gone over to see them, that they've ended up losing. So, and I mean, it is a bit of a surprise with the way the Leafs have been playing this season. They've played teams tough, but they don't have the quality to win games, and especially with how up and down Bernier's been this season. This is one of the games we expect them to come into and win, and they had a couple power play opportunities they let go, and then like you said, the refs in this game kind of just threw it away. You can't blame the whole game on the refs. They did lose 4-0, but it was a pretty bad performance for the officials.
Yeah, and I thought a key turning point in this game was when Polak hit Santarelli, knocked him down. He gets a 2-minute minor, which to me should have been way more. And then it ends up Manson and him start to fight. And, at the end of the fight after Manson pretty much levels him at the end, you see a late punch. Didn't really do much, but another late punch thrown to Manson. Manson goes off, and Manson's the one who gets 10 minutes booted out of the game. Thomas, looking at this, I was glad to see Manson obviously stand up for Santarelli getting knocked down. But at this point in the game, to me, it seemed just critical that the refs should have called more on Toronto at this point, and it just kind of seemed to affect the game from that point on.
Yeah, that was a very, very dangerous hit on Santarelli, and it should have been a major. There's no question about it. I think the league noticed it and told the ref to keep a closer eye on Polak, and that's why when he had a similar hit the next night against LA, they gave him a major and kicked him out of the game. And that hit, I don't think was as bad as the Santarelli hit. Most people don't think it was as bad, but it still was a relatively nasty one. But that one on Santarelli, no question, it should have been a major. That could have really, really injured Santarelli severely. And the Ducks say he's fine, but he was scratched the next game, and it's, I think, pretty obvious that they were holding him out just to make sure he is actually okay and good to go, because he's been one of their better players over the last bunch of games. He was great against Vancouver. He was great against Winnipeg. And he's been playing very, very well lately. So that hit was very scary, very dangerous, and it was completely ridiculous that Manson got the extra 10 minutes in that fight.
Yeah, I just thought it was unfortunate, and I think in the second period, another turning point was when Perry got knocked down, and then Toronto comes back down, scores on next sequence, makes it 2-0, and you see the Ducks end up basically, retaliating on a lot of the calls, which you don't blame them. They're not getting the calls, and you want to stand up for yourself and your teammates. So I don't blame them for that. The crazy thing about this game is it was the 26th game in a row where we had seen the Ducks either have the equal amount or less amount of power plays as their opponents. And I'll just shoot this one at Adam. What do you think? Do you think it's we don't want to say conspiracy that refs are against the Ducks, but do you think the Ducks aren't not working hard enough, or do you think that they're retaliating too much, or just what's your thought on it?
Well, no one wants to be that fan who goes, "Oh, the refs are against us, the leagues are against us." But it's kind of hard. They pulled up in the last broadcast. They were showing how many penalties the Ducks have taken in the last 10 years as opposed to power plays they've gotten. They are dead last in the NHL, and I'm not going to be that fan who says that the league's against us. But I do think a lot of it does come from either being out of position or being lazy. Certain players are like that, and certain times I think it's really, really bad refs, and it seems like when the refs are bad, they're not just kind of bad. They're pretty awful, And it's a combination of the two. It's a combination of lazy play and then bad refs that happen to be in the same game together. And it's definitely frustrating. It's definitely something the Ducks need to work on. The only thing they can work on, though, is fixing the laziness and being in position. They can't really do anything about the whole ref situation.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's something that's difficult. They have to fight through that. And they basically did that in the next game against the Blues. They ended up getting an early goal. I was joking on Twitter. Kessler gets his goal. Obviously he's number 17, but he gets it at 17 minutes. It was kind of weird, but it was kind of interesting that he did that. And the Ducks played a great first period. The second line was rolling with Hagelin, Silverberg, and Kessler, and they were rolling the whole night. But then you see the Ducks, the second period, all that craziness, Eddie, that we've talked about all last season, this season. They give up 3 goals in a row. They are taking penalties, or I should say Perry was being a punching bag for most of the period, and the game. But, the Ducks got down. Fortunately, Perry does get a goal late in the second, gets the Ducks back within 1, and then the Ducks go on fire in the third period. They really could have won this game in the third. And then eventually went to the overtime and to the shootout. But I thought the Ducks fought a lot better through the penalties in this game, Eddie.
Yeah, they've haven't really had any issues. I mean, obviously the penalty kill's been so great for most of the season, and they haven't really had any issues dealing with the refs and with adversity with penalties throughout the whole season. It's just the second periods. I mean, as much as last year we talked about it, it's become a problem again this year. Maybe not as much, but there are a lot of games that we've had, and they've played really well in the first period. And right when the second period comes out, it's a whole different team, and we see it in this game. I mean, the Ryan Reeves goal was one Gibson I'm sure he'd want back, and I mean even the Brouwer one as well, and not much you can do on the Robbie Friberg goal. Bieksa and Vatanen were caught out of position, and Friberg came off the bench, and one-on-one with Gibson, not much you can do, but they kind of just fell apart in most of that second period, and I think the key here is we saw something we haven't seen pretty much at all this season was Perry was able to get a goal 30 seconds after that goal, just a punch back and able to keep them in the game, because I think everybody would agree if they went into the third period down 3-1, there wasn't much hope with how this team's played and them coming back and winning. And like you said, they came out on fire in the third period and really could have won it. Brian Elliott stood on his head, and luckily we were able to get it done in the shootout for once.
Yeah, I mean, the Ducks finally came back, too. I don't have the stats on the comebacks, but it's not like last year when we had a ridiculous amount. So it was nice to see them come back and win this one. I'm curious, Thomas, what did you think about Tarasenko and Kessler going at it? We had a lot of craziness in the last game. What did you think about in this one? There was a lot of hits and cross-checking and all kinds of stuff going on throughout this game.
So the Blues are the only team in the Western Conference that the Ducks have never faced each other in playoffs, which I find surprising just because how nasty the games against St. Louis always are. These two teams just do not like each other, and that's without ever having faced each other in the postseason. So it's always expected there's going to be bad hits, there'll be nasty hits, there's going to be some fights, there'll be some rough and tumble hockey. We saw Getzlaf knock out Jay Bomoser in the first period with just a brutal but clean check. At one point, I forget who it was, but someone just nailed Sami Vatanen on the forecheck. Another brutal but clean check. And Kessler, in this play, he laid out Jori Lehtera, and Tarasenko wanted to stand up for his teammate. He thought the hit was low for the line, and I have no issue with him doing that. It was a pretty entertaining fight. I think it's always kind of fun watching superstars go at it, and while Kessler's not a superstar, Tarasenko certainly is. I think he's probably the second or third best goal scorer in the NHL today. So I thought this was a very, very entertaining tilt. My big issue with that entire sequence was just as that fight was starting, Vatanen came over to try and break up the play, but Jori Lehtera, after he got up, came over, cross-checked Vatanen right in the back, and sent him face first into the boards, and that was a very, very dangerous, scary moment, and that should have been a major penalty, regardless of what happened anywhere else on the ice. But I think because of the fight happening, the refs completely missed that one, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree with you. And you know what? I think the whole night it was just let's cross-check the Ducks from the Blues. I mean, I'm not saying the Ducks weren't nasty too, but that's just what it seemed like. There was that one sequence where Perry's laying in the ice. He gets cross-checked in the back, hit in the head, nothing. We see him get knocked into Allen, even though some of the Blues fans thought he ran into the goalie. Some of my Blues followers, sorry guys, it's not really what happened. Your own player pushed him into your goalie, so you might want to check the replay on that one. You can check out My Regular Face. She's got a lot of GIFs on there that show what really happened. But I think that the big key in this one, and I'll throw this one at Adam, is with Perry. So many people hate Perry, get on him and everything. But the thing that you have to give Perry credit for is he did not retaliate in this game. Not one time did he go back at them, even though he got his butt kicked literally throughout this game. Ice bath we heard for 45 minutes or an hour or something like that after the game. You have to give him credit for taking all those beatings and just not really trying to get goaded into bigger penalties at all, Adam.
I think it was very mature for Perry, and I think that's something we would like to point out to any of his detractors, anyone who says that he's nothing but an agitator. Look at his play in the St. Louis game. I think some of it might have to do with what happened in the Toronto game, his retaliation against Bernier's slash against the back of his knee. And I'm not saying that was wrong or that was right. I'm just saying that it happened. I think Corey Perry's taken notice of that kind of thing. And it was a good moment to see. It was a good game for him. It was good to see him not retaliate, step up and be that alternate captain that we need him to be on the ice like that.
Yeah, and I think, and I'll throw the last one to Eddie on this one. I think it's a key point that you look at the Ducks roster, you look at the scoring, and you have a handful of guys that, 4, 5, 6 goals, whatever. You have Perry being the main guy. He is the guy that's scoring for our team. We don't really have 2 or 3 guys like we did last year. So, to me, it seems like the strategy lately with some of these teams that play a more physical style of game, Winnipeg, Toronto, the Blues, some of the other teams we played earlier in the year, it seems like they go after Perry because they're like, okay, look at the Ducks roster. Perry's the guy. If we can shut him down, we can shut down the rest of the team, Eddie.
Yeah, I mean, that's the strategy we employ on most teams by putting Ryan Kessler on their best players. We did in the playoffs against Jonathan Toews and pretty much shut him out for most of the playoffs, even with Patrick Kane as well. And, I mean, it's a tactic that a lot of teams employ, but when you're a team that is struggling to score a lot of goals, I mean, you see it when a lot of teams play Philadelphia this season. If you shut down Giroux and Voracek, there's not much offense coming from the rest of that lineup. And it's a bit of the same here. I mean, Perry, it's hard to get under his skin, but if you can successfully shut him down, there's not that second line coming out that you got to worry about this year. And I mean, we're calping on that top line too. You take a little bit of offense out of that bottom 6, so it's definitely a tactic we've seen being played. Obviously, Perry has been able to fight through it and still scored a decent amount of goals so far this season, but it's something they definitely have to look to address.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's something the Ducks, they got to protect Perry, which they have been doing, so it's been good. But I just hope he stays healthy because I mean he's taking such a beating. Speaking about being healthy, we got some updates today. Some good news for the Ducks blue line. We heard about Simone Dupre was back out practicing. It looked like he was practicing in full. He wasn't wearing any non-contact jersey today, but I still think he kind of took it a little bit easy. But he was out there doing the individual stuff, doing some of the team stuff. We don't have a timetable when he gets back. I know a lot of you guys asked Dan Wood or Eric Stevens or myself and other people the timetable. We don't know, unfortunately. I am sorry. I know you want to know and I want to know. But at least he's out there. That's a good sign. So hopefully we get him back. They also said that Stoner was out there doing better as well and that he may be back on Sunday. If not, we're looking towards Wednesday. So that's some of the good news that we got today as far as the Ducks getting healthy on the blue line, because that's where we've had the majority of the injuries this season. With that, the big news this week was the trade that came out with the Ducks in Montreal. Max Friberg got sent to Montreal for the goalie, Tokarski. So that was the move that was made, which ended up sending up an explosion on social media, Eddie. Everybody was going crazy about what was going to happen. Anderson's gone, Gibson's gone, Khudobin's gone. I mean, it was just like crazy. I didn't put out an article on it until right away, and then we had a follow-up article with a poll question, explaining all the scenarios about what could happen. But what are your thoughts? We'll go around with everybody. What are your thoughts on this trade, Eddie?
Well, there was more excitement on what could come after this trade than really this trade. I mean, the trade itself isn't a big trade. It's a depth prospect for a depth goalie. That's Tokarski's had some NHL experience with Montreal and Tampa Bay, but there's no chance that he comes up and either ever starts for the Ducks. It's an AHL move, and there's some hope from Montreal. I assume that Friberg will eventually be able to fill out their bottom 6, if not this year, maybe next year. But it was more so the Ducks acquiring another goalie, which created all the talk. I mean, we've heard all season that there's a chance that Freddie could be traded if any goalie is traded. You don't see them after just extending Gibson and with his age and everybody expecting him to be the number 1 goalie for the next few years or for the foreseeable future. Andersen was the guy that everybody was talking about to be traded, and until Eric Stevens came out and said that Khudobin is the guy who wants out. He wants to start in the NHL or at least have an NHL job. So that kind of cooled the anger down a little bit. And I mean, we obviously haven't seen anything happen yet. The deadline is still over a month away, but it definitely created some stir among the fans, and we're still all waiting to see what actually comes out of this.
I'll go with Thomas next. What do you think about the trade? What do you think as far as another move? Because that's kind of, the word on the street is the Ducks are going to go for something else. We don't know exactly what, but what do you think, Thomas?
I think it depends upon what the Ducks want out of this season. If they want and still think they can make the playoffs, which I think they can, given the weakness in the Pacific Division this season, I think they will keep Frederik Andersen and then trade him at the draft. Because while Gibson is a great goalie both now and in the future, over the last few seasons he has had some injury problems, and if he goes down, having a combination of Khudobin and Tokarski in the playoffs is an incredibly terrifying thought, and the Ducks will probably be swept in the first round if that happens. So I think you have to keep both Andersen and Gibson if you are planning to make the playoffs this year. If the Ducks do think they will not make the playoffs this season, if they think the season is a lost cause, then I actually do think Andersen will be traded by the trade deadline. Now, all that being said, the Ducks could want to make the playoffs and still trade Andersen if some incredible deal was put in front of them, like if it was Andersen for Jonathan Drouin, Andersen for Thomas Van or Kyle Okposo, or just one of these really big names in the market was Andersen straight up for this one player, then the Ducks I think actually might consider that. But the odds of that happening, especially given the two players and names I just mentioned, it's very, very unlikely that will happen. And then as for the deal itself with Friberg for Tokarski, I think Friberg is a great prospect. He was one of my favorites in the Ducks system. I'm sorry to see him go. But his future is as a bottom six winger. He's not going to be a big-time scorer in the NHL. And what the Ducks need right now is scoring. There's no question. They desperately need goal scoring. So Friberg will not help them this season in that regard. So by trading him away and bringing in another goalie, if we trade Andersen, if we trade Khudobin, whoever it is, if it's used to bring in a scoring winger eventually, then I think this was the right move for the Ducks right now because Friberg, I love him as a prospect, but he's not going to help the Ducks scoring woes this season.
I completely agree with you. I met him a couple times. He's a really nice guy. He's a good forward, but he's not a top six guy like you're talking about, or a guy that's going to, put up 20, 30 goals. I mean, that's just the situation he's in right now. He's not a bad player. I'm not knocking him, but he's just not the type that we need. What do you think, Adam, as far as the trade and, maybe the Ducks trade a goalie for a winger to get some offense going?
I also like Friberg. I think that he's he was a solid AHL player / fringe NHL player. It sucks to see him go. This guy Tokarski, he's going to be a good AHL goalie. He could even be a decent backup NHL goalie if we decide to keep him. He's going to be an RFA at the end of the year. As for a trade, I also would advise against it. I don't think that's a great idea. If the Ducks are planning on making the playoffs, which I think they will, weak Pacific, like everyone has said, they can easily be the third or second team, maybe even the first, possibly, who knows. To see them trade Andersen or even Gibson, which isn't out of the realm of possibility, I think that would be saying we're not going to be making the playoffs or we don't plan on going deep in the playoffs. If we want it to be a competitive year, make it to the third round or so, keeping both goalies is vital to the Ducks' playoff chances.
And I think that's the thought amongst all of us. I really think, and I wrote that one piece when it first came out. I think if the Ducks do trade a goalie, I think Khudobin's the one that wants to go because I know firsthand that he doesn't want to be in San Diego, and it's not that he doesn't want to play for the Gulls, but he feels that he should have a chance back in the NHL, which we saw him, do pretty well in Carolina and Boston in those backup roles. So I don't blame him getting a chance. So it's going to be interesting to see. But if Murray is to try to help him do that, I could see Khudobin getting moved, and then maybe we get a forward or some kind of a package deal. Who that's going to be, I really don't know. The only thing that we do know is we know that the Ducks are in on Drouin. There was a tweet out earlier that I sent out talking about Syracuse hockey and the representatives at the game tonight, which is the New Jersey Devils, Nashville, Florida, Toronto, Ducks, as we mentioned, Ottawa, Buffalo, Chicago. So you have all these teams. There's probably a few more, that may be in on there too. So, Eddie, that's kind of been the talk. We had that article that you put out on Drouin, and we talked about that. What do you think as far as the Ducks going after him? Do you think he might be overpriced? Do you think the Ducks can make a trade for him? Or do you think Yzerman's just going to tell everybody to pound sand?
It's a tough situation. It doesn't happen often where a guy of this quality with the potential that he has and where he got drafted and only being in the league for 2 years and that he asked for a trade out of the team, and it's tough to really put what his value is. I mean, if out of the draft, if you were to try and trade him, then his value was at the highest. I mean, everybody expected him to come into the league this year and challenge for the Calder Trophy. He's been plagued with a lower body injury, being out 3 separate times this season, and I mean, he started off really strong, and now he only has 8 points in 19 games played. But he played the first game for Syracuse this season, and he scored 2 goals in his first game. So it's tough to put his value anyway. I mean, he's going to command a lot. I don't think he's going to command as much as he could have earlier on in his career or later down his career if they decide to keep him beyond this season, which I highly doubt seeing. I would assume that he'd probably get dealt before the deadline. There's going to be a lot of good offers coming from pretty much every team in the league, and from what we've heard, the Ducks are up near the front, and Tampa Bay is looking for a right-handed defenseman and a in-your-face physical type forward, and I mean those are 2 things that we have, and I think our defense core and our depth on our defense is strong enough that we're able to give up one. And I mean, this isn't a trade that just makes us better this season. This is a trade that makes you better in the long run. Drouin's going to be a quality top 6 player, if not, I mean, one of the most dynamic goal scorers in the league in a couple seasons. I think it all depends on the system that he gets played in.
Good points, Eddie. Thomas, what do you think about Drouin and all these teams trying to pursue him?
I think the issue with someone like Jonathan Drouin, and he was the 3rd overall pick in the 2013 draft. And the 2013 draft, it was still only a couple of years ago, so it's still hard to say how good or bad that draft is and where a lot of players are. But there's clearly some very good players that's come out of that draft. Nathan McKinnon, Alexander Barkov, Seth Jones, Darnell North, Sean Monahan, our own Shea Theodore, all come out of that draft. So it's a good draft. Drouin taking 3rd overall means that a lot of people were very high on him at the time. His NHL career so far has not panned out well, but the question is that his own doing? Is that the coach misusing him? Is that the coach putting him in a checking role because that's how they want him to start out and they want him to earn top line minutes? And it's hard to say exactly why his NHL career has not gotten off the way it has. But because his NHL career is not where a lot of people expected, it's hard to say what his value is. I mean, if you told me in 2013 the Ducks traded the 26th overall pick for the 3rd overall pick straight up, which would be Theodore for Drouin, I would have been ecstatic at the time. Today, I'm not sure I would do that deal just because we've seen, in a very limited sample size, but Shea Theodore has looked like he belongs in the NHL and looks very comfortable and very confident on the Ducks blue line. So right now, I don't think I would do that deal, whereas 2 years ago, I would have done it in a heartbeat. So because of how his career trajectory has gone, it's very hard to judge what his value is. Is he worth an actual top 4 defenseman, like, say, a Sami Vatanen, or is he worth a prospect defenseman like Brandon Montour? So it's hard to judge exactly what he is. Also, the other thing to keep in mind is if the Ducks were to trade for him and give up, say, Vatanen or Dupre or anyone in their blue line, they have to be very careful because with so many bodies injured right now, if they trade Vatanen or Lindholm tomorrow for Jonathan Drouin straight up, their top 6 will be Holzer, Stoner, Bieksa, Theodore, either Lindholm or Vatanen, whoever's left, and Manson. And that is not a very good top 6. Now, granted, Dupre should hopefully be back in the next couple of weeks. Fowler's hopefully only 2 or 3 more weeks away at this point. But still, if that was your top 6 for a period of several weeks, it could really bury the Ducks in a hole. So if the Ducks want him, this kid, Drouin, it will be very difficult to trade someone out of their top 4 for him without really hurting the team going forward.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think it's a tough spot. What do you think, Adam? You think the Ducks will try to make a pitch, or do you think we're going to pass on this deal?
It's hard to tell whether he's going to be traded at the trade deadline or beforehand. We've seen some blockbuster trades already happen. Before the trade deadline. We're still like a month and a little over a month away from it. I could see the Ducks making an offer, maybe, for Drouin. Right now, I think he's going to be a little more expensive than he will be at the deadline. I do think that, they're looking for that right-handed defenseman. It could be like Shattenkirk from the Blues is what I've heard, or I guess for us it'd be Vatanen or someone like that. I could see the Ducks getting him, but I don't think that it'll be before the trade deadline. If the Ducks were going to get him, it would be at the trade deadline, and it would be for Vatanen plus something. I don't know what it would be.
So because of then the most of our blue line will be healthy as well. It just makes more sense.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. It does make more sense because we're still waiting. I mean, even though Dupre's out there skating, it's going to be some time. You get Stoner back. Fowler's still, a few weeks out, so we have to wait and see. But as far as other people out there, and I'll give everybody, your own shot at this, and I'll go in the same order. I'll go with Eddie first. Besides Drouin, is there anybody else out there that you would, want the Ducks to try to pursue if the deal was right, or anybody that, maybe someone that hasn't been mentioned in the media? What would you think, Eddie, as far as other potential players of the Ducks? We got a month and a half here to go, but who they might pursue?
Well, there was 5 guys I was looking at for most of the season, and with rumors. I'm only going to mention one because I don't want to take anybody else's. But one guy that I've really been hoping that they've been looking at it all. I guess it all depends on where the team finishes. But Loui Eriksson for the Boston Bruins, he can play left or right wing, and he's having a renaissance season with the Bruins this year. I mean, he hasn't done that well on the Bruins since he left the Stars. In the trade for Tyler Seguin, and he's having a great season this year, playing majorly with David Krejci and at times Matt Beleskey as well. And I think he would be a great addition. The only problem is it all depends on where the Bruins are. Right now they're sitting around that 7th, 8th, 9th spot in the playoffs, and I think they do think that they can make the playoffs and maybe not go far, but at least challenge. And he's a big part of their offense, and I'm not too sure exactly what they'd be looking for, because if you give up a scoring winger, I think they'd be looking for another one. He is a UFA at the end of the season, so his value will be a lot less than it would be if he was still under contract. So I think he's a guy they should definitely look at. He could really bolster the top 6, and his power play numbers this season have been really good as well.
Yeah, I added him on my fantasy team, but Tasha's still killing me this week, so not he's there, but she's killing me by almost 50 points. But anyways, I'm hoping to do better later on in this one. But I agree with you. I think he's a great option to go for. Like you said, left and right wing, definitely someone the Ducks should look for. Thomas, who out there would you try to pursue if you were the Ducks?
There's a few players I would look at. I definitely agree. Loui Eriksson is one player who I've thought for a long time that would fit very nicely in Anaheim. But there are 2 players I'll mention. The first, from Columbus, Kirby Reichel. He's another first-round pick from 2013. He is also requested to trade.
Yes.
He's a left winger. He doesn't have the same potential that Jonathan Drouin does, but he's a first-round pick. He plays on the left wing, which the Ducks, they always desperately need left wingers in their system. He's someone who I think would be much easier to get out of Columbus than Drouin out of Tampa Bay. So if someone else gets Drouin, Reichel might not be a terrible, option instead. And the other player I would look at is from the Winnipeg Jets, Andrew Ladd. He's having a very, very strong season. And Winnipeg, at this point, they are last in the Central Division. And, at most 5 teams in that division will make the playoffs. And I think 4 of those spots are pretty much locked. That last spot will be Nashville, Colorado, Winnipeg, and I think Nashville will get it. So with Winnipeg out of the playoffs, I think they're going to trade their big UFAs. And I think Andrew Ladd, he's a big body. He's got a mean streak. He can score goals. I think he'd fit in very nicely on the Ducks roster.
Yeah, I like both those names. Reichel's name has come up, and there's been a few teams that are in on him too as well. So I could definitely see him getting moved, along with obviously Drouin. That's the big name that's thrown around all over the place. But you're right, Ladd's another one that's a good one that we could add. Adam, what are your thoughts on who's out there and who would you go after?
I think Eriksson would be not a bad choice because he can't play left and right wing. With finding that left wing for Perry and Getzlaf kind of in Rickard Rakell, it makes it a little more difficult trying to find a scoring option through a trade. We have Rakell. I think he's doing very well. I think he's someone that they can rely on even into the playoffs and such. He's been doing so well on that left wing spot. It doesn't quite negate the need for going out and trading for a big scorer, but it does kind of help. It does make you don't need to go get Drouin or someone of that caliber. You can get someone who can just kind of help out as a first, sometimes second, maybe even sometimes third line kind of guy. And to me, a name that kind of stands out is Colin Wilson from the Nashville Predators. He has not been having a very great season there. He'd be looking for some sort of change. They have been looking to trade him. He was part of that Seth Jones Ryan Johansson trade initially before it went down to the player for player trade. So he's on the block. He could be bought relatively cheap because of the season he's having, and I think that he would actually do pretty good on the Ducks.
Yeah, I mean, and you know Nashville pretty well because you follow them as well, as long as the Ducks. So if it's someone like that can come in and even add, like Stewart or Santorelli this season, that those kind of numbers, in the second half of the season would be an added bonus for sure. Tasha, do you have anybody that you have your eye on out there that the Ducks should go after?
I'm having a coughing fit right now, so everybody, I'm really sick, so I will not talk at the moment.
No worries. Back to you.
Yeah, well, I guess the good thing was nobody mentioned the other guys I had, so I can mention the other 4 guys that I had. A lot of them are names that have been kind of popping up here and there throughout the season. I guess the first one is Kyle Okposo from the New York Islanders. He's a pending UFA at the end of the season, and it doesn't look like the Islanders are going to attempt to re-sign him, so they'll be... the only situation with this is because they are most likely going to make the playoffs. It's a guy you wouldn't expect to get moved at the deadline, but just with the fact that they will probably not re-sign him, there would be potential for him to get moved and maybe then bring in another forward in a trade. And any forward we bring in, we're going to have to move one, either going the opposite way in that trade or in another trade, because we're already having issues having to healthy scratch somebody every night, either being Sekach or Santorelli or Stewart. So any trade for a top 6 or top 9 forward, we're going to have to send someone back. But he would definitely fit the system. He's a physical power forward. He's more of a right wing, so I'm not too sure where he'd fit in. You wouldn't want to really force him over into the left wing and play him on that top line. You've got 3 right-handed shots. It might be a little bit difficult. That's when you could look at a guy that I think everybody has mentioned so far is a guy they'd love to see on the top line with Perry and Getzlaf, and that's James Van Riemsdyk from the Toronto Maple Leafs. And just the way he plays, and he can score goals, he can make plays, but he's just a sneaky kind of player. He's a little bit like Corey Perry. He's not as much of a pest, but he kind of gets into those spots in front of the net. He creates havoc for the goaltenders, and he has some really, really good hands in front of the net, and he can just make plays happen. I think he would work. If you had to pick somebody in the league to play on that top line with them, I think he'd be one of the guys, if available, that you would definitely search to put on that line. And then I'll just quickly name the last 2, so I'm not dragging it on here. Cam Atkinson from the Columbus Blue Jackets is a guy that's been rumored to being dealt around. I think the Rangers are favorites to get him, but he's a guy that could really help on that second or third line. And then Jordan Eberle is a guy that has been mentioned a lot this season. The Oilers are looking to add some guys on their defense. They're in for Seth Jones, but they didn't have enough to compete. Obviously, Ryan Johansson, they didn't have enough to compete with that, but it's rumored that they're looking to move either Ryan Nugent-Hopkins or Jordan Eberle. So I think if Eberle became available, we definitely have the defense depth to go out and get him.
Those are all actually good, options that you bring up, and some of those names have been mentioned before by other people as well. So it's going to be a crazy another month and a half. I'm personally taking work off on the trade deadline, so we can bring you more stuff just like we did last year. I don't want to give away all the details yet, but we're hoping to have some live stuff for you on that day. So stay tuned for that as the weeks come and get closer to the trade deadline. With all that, let's try to get to some of the fan questions. We always have people that want to ask and know stuff and feel our thoughts and whatnot. So we'll get to some of those. We had one on Twitter from Mark, and Mark talks about the injuries, and we kind of brought this up with Fowler, Stoner, and Dupree. And I'll go with Thomas first and kind of go back to the order we've been going through. But he asked the question, with them coming back, what do you think happens on the blue line? Who do you think gets down to the blue line, Thomas?
That's a tough one. And earlier this season, we saw Corbinian and Holzer placed on waivers at San Diego when the entire blue line was healthy. So I think that's one thing the Ducks will do as they start getting healthier. The real question is, what are they going to do with Theodore? He's proven he is good enough right now to play in the NHL, certainly at least in a bottom six role and on that top power play unit. I think since the Ducks do need so much scoring help, that someone from their top six is going to be traded at some point before the deadline to bring in maybe one of the players you discussed or someone we haven't even thought about, who knows, but just to bring someone in to help out with the scoring and using one of those defensemen as the way to do that, which will enable the Ducks to keep Theodore up with the team. He's proven he's good enough to be in the AHL and belongs with the Ducks right now.
Adam, what do you think? Who gets sent back down, or who gets last man out kind of when we get all the D-men back?
I think along with what Thomas said, Theodore has earned his spot here in his play. So I think it would have to be Holzer or possibly Stoner, or obviously you're not going to sit someone like Lindholm or Fowler or even Dupre. If we do move someone like Vatanen or something like that, that would clear it up. But I think right now the choice would be Holzer, because like we said, Theodore has earned his spot on this team.
Eddie, any last final thoughts on this?
Yeah, I definitely agree with everybody. I think similar to how Shane Gostisbehere has done with the Philadelphia Flyers this year, Theodore's came up and he's really proved himself. I mean, he hasn't put up the numbers that Gostisbehere has done in Philadelphia, but I think he's proven to that he is NHL ready, and that creates a little bit of a situation. Obviously, Holzer's a guy you can send down, but other than that, you can't really send down anybody else. I think when everybody comes back healthy, if guys like Drouin or some of the other guys we mentioned are still available, that creates a great opportunity for you to move one of the defensemen that you have to create that opportunity for Theodore so he can stay up in the lineup, and it gives you a good opportunity to add a scoring winger. So I think if we do make a move, then Theodore really is the number, the guy that's going to stay in the lineup.
Yeah, I agree with all of you. I think Theodore is the guy that's going to stay up for sure. Another question that we had going to the goalie situation, I guess if we kind of assume if Andersen stays, Tyler asks about the situation between Gibson and Andersen. Do you pretty much go with Gibson being the guy right now, or would you see Andersen come back in and either split time or take over that role, and kind of, where do you go from there? What do you think, Thomas?
Given Gibson's injury history and given the phenomenal play that Andersen had at the start of the season, I think you play both. I think Gibson at this point, because of how well he's played since he's been called up, the 2 shouts in back-to-back games and 4 shouts overall, just how well he's been playing. I think at this point he's your starter, but I think Andersen will play more than typical backup would. I mean, this last game is probably Gibson's worst outing. That Ryan Reeves goal he gave up, I think the worst goal of the season he's given up. But even with that said, he's still among the leaders among goals against average in the AHL. Granted, it's a smaller sample size than most of the players on that list, but he has still played simply phenomenal since he's rejoined the Ducks. So I think he's your starter. But I think Andersen will get a decent amount of playing time, and I'm probably expecting Andersen to get the start tomorrow when the Ducks take on Detroit. If not then I think later in the week Andersen certainly will see the net, just because you want to keep him fresh, you want to keep him sharp. If anything happens to Gibson, you want to make sure Andersen is ready to go at a moment's notice. And also, if the Ducks, if they have to trade Andersen to get that scoring winger they want, playing him and showcasing him can only help their cause going forward as well.
Yeah, you're right. That's a very good point. You don't want him sitting on the bench either being rusty if Gibson gets hurt, or, being there and then, hey, you're trying to shop him around, but, well, you're trying to shop him around and he's not even playing. So you make a very good point there. Adam, what do you think about the goalie situation?
I do not think Anaheim has a backup goalie at this time. I think we have a 1A and a 1B. And depending on the week, depending on the opponent, Gibson can be the 1A or he can be the 1B. Andersen is only 26. It's not like he's an old guy or anything. We can ride both goaltenders, ride the hot hand. And, that was a lot of success last year right there. And I think that'll happen again this year. You just ride the hot hand. Andersen is not a backup. Gibson is not a backup. Both of them are starter caliber goalies in this league, and I think that we should play them as such, especially if we keep them both. There's no point to say, oh, Andersen's the designated backup or Gibson is the designated backup. Play both, play the hot hand. It seems to be something that Boudreau likes to do anyways, and I don't see any reason to stop that.
That's what the Ducks have said anyway. Is there's 1A and 1B.
Yeah, that's.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, exactly. They've been going with the 1A and the 1B. Eddie, any final thoughts on the goalie situation?
No, I think everybody summed it up pretty much. You would hope to see a little bit more of Andersen coming up, either if Thomas said it, is to boost his value in a trade, or just to get some rest on Gibson. Obviously, he's going to be going to the All-Star game, and when he comes back, depending on hopefully he doesn't get hurt, but we would like to see Andersen hopefully start tomorrow, get a shot in net. Gibson's struggled a little bit in the last few games compared to his play when he first got called up, and obviously the shutouts and everything like that. But yeah, we'll be riding both of them for most of the season, and like you said, you would expect Andersen to play more than a regular backup.
We've answered a majority of the questions. I have one last one, which is pretty much kind of a yes or no. I think you're all going to say yes, but if anybody's going to say no, that's fine too. Jimmy threw out a question about the playoffs. He says, do you think the Ducks will make the playoffs? I say yes. I don't know if anybody has anything else different or something else they want to add. If anybody does, go for it. But I think we're all yes.
Yeah. I would
Yes.
in this
I
division.
think they can.
Yeah.
But yeah, only because it's in the Pacific. If they're in the Central, if they're in the Atlantic, if they're in the Metropolitan, they do not make it. They are very lucky they're in the Pacific Division right now, because other than LA, this entire division has been terrible this season and incredibly inconsistent.
And I don't think anybody would disagree with you, Thomas. The Pacific Division is more like the pathetic division because, I mean, it is. I mean, besides the Kings, and you have to give credit where credit's due, they've been playing very well. So it's going to be interesting to see because we're going to face them later on in this homestand. So, we're going to have some tough battles coming up, too. A couple other things going on coming up. We have the All-Star game coming up. If you didn't hear, Gibson and Perry got named to it. So at least we got some representation there. After that awesome vote for, John Scott, the guy everybody wanted. So at least we got a couple of Ducks in there. That'll be good. On the goal front, we had in the NHL in general, Iginla got his 600th goal this past week, and then you had Ovechkin getting number 499, so he's right there on the cusp of getting 500. So, just a little bit of news around the league. We'll keep you guys updated on everything that we can, and keep following the website with all the updates. I've got a couple more new writers, which I got to maybe try and get them on here and whatnot, but we're going to be doing more articles and just keep on improving and doing what we're doing. And I thank everybody on here for all the work you guys have done the last couple seasons and being on the show. And I just hope that we keep rolling on this homestand and get in a better position.